Dearly redheaded, we are choosing consciousness today to get through this thing called grief. Interesting word, grief. It means love, which makes for a mighty good joke. But I'm here to tell you, there's nothing else. Just joy. And if the big picture tends to bring you down, go crazy once your life goes. Woo!
All right, we're on episode 3 with Pam Doors. Pam, this is a good time for you to explain, and I think you told me it was at my aunt's funeral when you were approached by neighbors.
Yeah.
My aunt passed away in November of 23. And speak to what happened.
Yeah, so I went to Joanne's aunt's funeral because Joanne's aunt's home was right down the street from where my house was, and I often...
What's an aunt?
Your aunt, whatever. I'm in the South now, you know. Aunt, I'll go back to the New York side of me. So I spent a lot of time in her house because she just was a safe place. She wouldn't yell. She wouldn't scream. She would let me come hang out. She would try to teach me how to read music, which was just a lost cause. She would play the piano. She would just be a safe place. So I felt very connected to, and I called her Aunt Carol. I mean, she was just my aunt. And I traveled up to the funeral because I needed to be able to have closure with, was a safe person for me. And there were some of the other older neighbors that were there. And when I sat down next to one of them, she says, you know, why are you here? And I said, well, you know why I'm here. I mean, I spent a lot of time at her house, and it was a place that I could find comfort. And she said, you know, she said, a lot of us neighbors used to get together and we would discuss how your childhood was, or even as you were a kid, how your house was, what you had to endure. And we often felt really sorry for you, and saw how your brother was the golden child and you were just literally shit for your parents to kick around. But there was just nothing we could do about it because we just weren't going to go up against your family. But we know, and you should know that we knew, and we all felt terribly sorry for you, but there just was nothing that we could do.
And I believe you said, she said, so their solution was to avoid them.
Yeah. So they cut off relationships with my parents. Everybody, even our next door neighbors. We used to have clam bakes together. We used to spend lots of time together as neighbors. You know, the neighbors would get together at 5 o'clock happy hour. The kids would all run around. We'd swim, we'd ski, we'd boat. We would do all the stuff as an incredibly tight-knit community. And then it just stopped. It just stopped. My parents actually told me it had to do with some lawsuit about beach rights. You know, the sand creates land, the sand goes away and takes away land. There was some story that my dad told us about a lawsuit. He was going to sue one of the neighbors because they had more beach than he did, and it was his sand or some bullshit, something or other. But after being at the funeral, come to find out that was not the case. They just decided it was just better to just part ways and just let whatever was happening in my house be just in my house. It wasn't going to be front and center for them.
Yeah. Hey, as you're talking, I'm having some Aunt Carol memories, especially from the year I was there, 5th grade, when you were in 6th. And I'm also assuming that you found comfort in her after I left through the grades.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, before and after. Yeah, 100%.
Well,
yep.
How about if we share a couple Aunt Carol stories? Because and I'll cry, but I remember when I had gone to you remember the park on the main road? I'd gone
Yep.
to the park to watch baseball. And I came back, and Aunt Carol asked me if it was a close game. I said, nah, not really. It was 7-3, 7-4. And she said, that's not close, 73-74. And I'm like, yeah, Carol, it's baseball, babe. And then I remember we used to play Scrabble, and I'd fall asleep between turns because she'd take so friggin' long to go.
Yeah.
And the cigarettes and the rum cake.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You have anything?
Was it Manhattan's? What was her drink? I'm trying to remember. Her and Diddy would have a drink.
Aunt Carol was Scotch.
Scotch. Okay. I remember I'd walk to the door and I'd knock on the door because even though she would say, just come in, I'd knock on the door. Before Diddy passed away, he'd come with his booming self. What are you doing here? And then he'd crack a big smile. Come on in. And I'd go in and Aunt Carol would be, I don't know, sitting on the couch with her glasses, looking up, reading the paper or doing a crossword, doing something. And she would just very quietly, just come on over here and sit down. So I don't think I got to have all of that laughter and humor as much as she knew I just needed a place to just come sit and be quiet. And then she would ask, do you want to play? Do you want to learn something on the, sure, I'll learn. I'll try to learn the piano. And yeah, no, that was a lost cause. And she'd play 3 notes and tell me to play them. And I was like a moron. And of course I would screw them up and Duddy would do some sort of laughter or some sort of, crass comment. And then we'd go on to doing something else.
Do you remember Duddy, my uncle, yelling out on the front porch to the neighbors?
Oh, hell yeah. It was funny because at your aunt's funeral, some of your cousins asked me if I was terrified of Duddy and his yelling. And I'm like, no, it never scared me at all. But it was never really directed at me. He was always yelling at somebody else, or he would have that twinkle in his eye when he would be saying, what are you doing here? Well, what do you think I'm doing here? Step aside, dude. I'm coming in.
Yeah, that never I adopted that when I lived in New York on several acres. I would go on the front porch and scream at the neighbors or wake up. You would tell everybody to wake up.
Wake up. Yes, he would. Yep.
Yeah. It
was good.
Yeah, they were something. And my mother and Aunt Carol were so close. And
God, yeah.
I don't know if you realize, but Carol left us in November of 23, and my mother was right behind her in May 2nd of 24.
Yeah, 2 peas in a pod, those two.
Very different women, but very close in ways that it's hard to explain, especially as they got older. Because they were very, very different when they were, my mother had me when she was 42, so I was like both their mistake child.
Yeah, and you're right. They were very different, but they had an affection for each other that far went beyond the mortal plane. Yeah, they were 2 very special ladies for sure. Everybody should be blessed to have a relationship like they had.
My mother was my savior in all that I went through. Put us in predicaments left and right. But, she ultimately, and ironically, this is a good segue. My mother ultimately, and again, I haven't shared my full story here, but ultimately my mother had to choose me over her kids or where I was at with her kids. And this is what I wanted to bring back to you. Can you speak to your daughter and your husband and the decision that Rick ultimately had to make as a result of how you were being I don't know, say disrespected, say framed, say whatever.
Yeah, well, we'll call it disrespected because that felt like the most empowering emotion at the time. So my daughter got to a point to where she would just call me Pam. She wouldn't call me mom. When talking about me to my husband or the other kids or even me, and that really started to grate me, obviously, the wrong way, I guess, because I'm a traditionalist. I'm a mom. I can only be a mom to certain people on the planet, but I can be Pam to everybody. And she would start calling my husband and twisting things, maybe twisting his mind. I feel like he's very easily melded when it comes to emotions. And I was seeing pretty quickly that he'd come home from work and be like, oh, on my drive home today, I talked to her and she was telling me this and telling me that and blah, blah, blah. And it was starting to become a wedge between us. He would start to, he would leave the room and go out and answer the phone or do texting. And I'd be like, who are you texting? Oh, nobody. So it started to become a secret that he was talking to her as much as he was and texting her as much as he was. And it was her idea for him not to tell me. So the one thing that I have in my relationship with my husband above everything else is there will be no lying about anything. I would rather face the truth head on and deal with it as it stands, but can't lie about anything. I don't care if it's that you got a speeding ticket because you were actually speeding, don't try to go to court without telling me. I just want it all. So she started to convince him that it just wasn't necessary to tell me that they were having conversations and they were talking. And so that made me very uncomfortable because it felt like he was starting to choose sides because he was going against one of the important tenets of our marriage for the sake of his daughter. So I dragged him back to marriage counseling. We had been multiple times over the years, and it was always for the same reason. But this time I asked the therapist outright, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm feeling. I need help. And she looked at him and she said, what the fuck is wrong with you? It was the best therapist I'd ever been to. What the fuck is wrong with you? And he said, I'm sorry, what? She actually called him a fucking moron, which he found very degrading, but I found quite enlightening. Because she said, did you choose your wife 30 years ago? And he said, well, yeah. And she said, then why are you throwing her aside now? And he just didn't get it. She had to put it out there. I needed an ultimatum. He needed to pick me or her, the daughter or me, because I could readily see what was coming down the pike. And I knew that he would succumb to it. I just knew it. And, he had already seen what had happened with the obituary, and he saw what I had been through. And it was dumbfounding to me as to why he needed to be actually given the ultimatum, why he couldn't see it in his own eyes. But he is who he is, and he had to choose, and it broke his heart. But I said, all these years of marriage, I've learned that I don't have to stay. As much as I love you, or I loved my mother, or I loved my daughter, I don't have to put up with abuse. I can say no more. So he had to ultimately choose me, which of course released a whole bunch of crap from my daughter. But he had to say, until you're willing to have a conversation with the two of us, we can no longer converse. And it was really hard for him. But I still, even to now, to this day, I don't know that he realizes how hurtful it was that I had to make him choose. And knowing what he knows at that juncture, I really felt like that was going to be the last straw of my marriage. But ultimately he made the choice. And I know that she hasn't reached out to him since. And I don't know why she's respected that boundary, finally. but it does give me some peace that my marriage is still intact, and maybe we'll go for another 35 years. But it was tough. It was probably one of the toughest things he's ever had to do, and one of the toughest things I've ever had to ask him to do, because I felt like it should have been a no-brainer given the circumstances.
Especially, and this is huge. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Especially because you thought it was a no-brainer that your mother and father would get it, that regardless of what they had done to you, you gave them a shot at your children.
Yeah.
And this is another form of that, where after doing that and recognizing the harm in it, you now had to go back to your spouse and say, hey, listen, it didn't work the fucking first time. I can't. And I'm in that position a lot in talking to people and in my own circumstances, which, again, I don't want to make this about, but that's how you learned it doesn't work. I agree with you. I've often said, if my ex could just say, I was a shitty husband, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to fucking say anything else to my kids. That's all he has to say.
Yeah.
But instead, we've got to pretend that shit has gone on, that, it's just an amazing cycle.
Well, we talked about it yesterday, and that we were out looking at houses yesterday, and he asked me, he said, why are you doing this podcast? And, there was a plethora of reasons why I felt like I needed to do it. But, I said, one of the things we're going to have to talk about on this podcast is my relationship with you. I said, and how all those years you really made me walk through fire over and over and over, no matter how scarred and how burned I was, you made me keep doing it. And even then, he couldn't say, I'm so sorry, I was such an ass. He was like, yeah, I know, but I just didn't get it. And I'm like, can you not just tell me that you're sorry for doing that to me? Is that not a thing? He's like, but am I? Yeah, I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings, but I really thought we could get past this. And I think it's interesting, even after all of that, all of everything, he still can't grasp what that was like for me. My latest tattoo was a phoenix, and it's rather large. And it was there to remind me and everybody else, because that's on the outside of my calf, and it's large. It's probably 14, 16 inches, and wraps around my lower leg. Because when people say, wow, what's that? Well, that's a phoenix. Well, isn't that the bird that flies through fire and continues to live? I said, yeah, actually they rise from the ashes. That's me. That's me. Yeah. Yeah. I ought to put my husband's name right across its wings, because,
I love the story. And I had a therapist. I actually had, we had a very decent, I'm going back 100 years, but we had a very decent therapist she didn't say, what the fuck's wrong with you? But she came damn close, and she said, if you're in a bar fight and your husband's standing next to you, he'd leave you alone to fight the fight and only come back into the bar if he forgot his keys.
Oh.
And I looked at her and I went, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then, true story, we go back, or I go back, or whatever the situation was, and she looked at me, and she had a long-term marriage. She had taken a woman under her wing, given her a position, and her husband gave this woman a position in his company. Can you see where this is going? And then he subsequently had an affair with that woman. And she said, I can't do this anymore with people when it's happening in my own life. And that's how that ended. So it was a very, very interesting experience. The other thing I wanted to say, in deference to your daughter, is she's in an abusive relationship.
She is. He's the man that she chose, I don't even have words. I mean, he's so so I have to tell you, and I'm sure this sort of will help understand what she's dealing with. When I first met, now the very first time I met him, she brought him home, and he was not in my house for an hour. And I was sitting at my kitchen island, and he walks up behind me, and he wraps his arms around my body, puts his face in my neck, and says, "You know, I'm your favorite, right?" And I turned around and looked at him like, "Excuse me, don't touch me." Yeah, I mean, I didn't even say anything at first because I was so appalled. And then he stepped back and he looked me in the eyes and he goes, "Go ahead, say I'm your favorite." And Rick was standing there, and I looked at this kid and I'm like, "Get the fuck away from me. Do not touch me. Do not hug me. You are now not and never will be my fucking favorite anything." And my daughter walked in the room right when she heard that part,
Right.
of course. And she said, "Why are you talking to him like that? My God, Mom, can you not be nice to anybody?" Clearly not. But he is very narcissistic. When my daughter got married, the boys went to the wedding because of course they were invited. And my oldest son asked her the first second he saw her if she was dying. And she said, "What?" And he said, "Do you have cancer?" And she said, "What are you talking about?" He told her, "You're gray. You weigh 100 pounds at best. You've got these dark circles under your eyes. I can see all the bones in your face and the bones on your shoulder blades. You're horrible looking." Her response was, "Well, he likes me thin."
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to interject this here. I'm interjecting more than usual, I think. Maybe I
Okay.
always do. I don't know. But because I came from a family of origin that was narcissistic and then married one overt to covert abuse, I'd just like to say that what I've decided is we all have the potential to be narcissistic. And you got to deal with those unconscious and conscious things that go on and examine yourself and examine your shadow. And that's why somebody who can be very nice to somebody else is a total asshole to me, because like you said earlier, they're attracted to the light. We hold the mirror. So I was studying narcissism before it was a pop word. And I'm fortunate to have had my ex be diagnosed. I think it was 2007. So almost 20 years ago. And once I knew what it was, and this was almost 20 years ago, I went, well, now that I motherfucking know what it is, I can deal with it. It's just taken me a long time to figure out what the fuck happened. And that just, you can imagine, that just made it worse. It just made it worse. But I think, unfortunately, when we take a word like that and don't really understand that we can't be stuck there, because then nothing moves, nothing heals. Does that make sense? I mean,
It does. And narcissist, yeah, that's a relatively new term, I feel like, as far as being, like you said, pop culture and today. That's not anything I had ever really, it's not even a word I'd heard until 6-7 years ago. Hell, I had to look it up. I'm
right.
like, wait, what does this even mean? And even now, I'm not entirely sure that I could point a finger at a narcissist when I first meet them, because that's just not, I'm just not, I guess I'm not wired that way. But yeah.
But I would think that like I know, and you could tell me I'm fucking wrong, but you put a fucking 16-inch phoenix on your leg. if you're gonna fuck with me, I'm gonna fuck with you. but I'm not a fucking narcissist. But then I mirror them because I know how, and I've said it one step greater. I've said, if you're going to behave sociopathically, you pick the wrong broad.
Yeah.
But it's not things I do for sport. And that's a real difference. I have to be pushed to that place. I'm not there like you're the guy in the kitchen being sweet on you. I mean, that, there's and by the way, that's where I was going to go after you and I are done, to not necessarily narcissism, but estrangement, and what aspects of behavior are conscious and unconscious, because I used to really be in the camp that it was learned behavior. I didn't give nature and genetics and multi-generational trauma all, give credit where credit's due. It's a very involved. I've had major conversations about whether it's conscious or unconscious, and the bottom line is it's both.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to make the unconscious conscious, that's when you start to, examine your own behaviors. That's why I understand why people in my family can treat my boys a certain way, but have to treat me a certain way, just like your mother did to you. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah, and I think there's certain people that do it consciously because, like you said, it's sport.
Yeah.
Then there are other people. Yeah, then there are other people that are just that way from, their own related traumas or experiences or nature and, whatever. But I've certainly come across quite a few people that clearly do it for sport. And you're absolutely right. I feel like, I've got the Phoenix because I call it my loyalty bone. It's like the biggest bone in my body. You fuck with me or you fuck with one of my people, which there are very few of on this planet.
Right.
My ride or die girls, and I will go into fire. But I've often said, God, one day I'd love to put the sword and shield down and let somebody else go into the fire for me. And I don't know that I'll ever be able to do that. And I don't know if it's because I don't have somebody who will do that for me, or if it's just that I don't trust anybody to do it as well as I do it.
Well, and now we're talking like friends and less like that's where I embrace the divine masculine versus the divine feminine, because I am a very soft-souled person, but I didn't have the opportunity to be that because I had to embrace my masculine side. Not to mention I'm in finance, not to mention fuck, cock, cunt falls off my tongue, and 67 other things. And so now I am still in my journey back to self, because even this podcast is very masculine to me. I'm doing it to spare grief and incite joy, but really, if I could, be in solitude and have the same effect, but that's the only place where I can have an effect on myself to then bring it here. I don't know if that makes sense. Plus there's a spiritual awakening and other things that have played into what I'm doing. But this conversation, and I know you see it, and hopefully Rick will see it. This conversation is gonna change people. And they're not going to be sitting in therapy talking about narcissism for 67 years. And obviously 67 is the number of the day, because I've said it 4 times. But that's why I think psychology is so antiquated. They're not, my joke is figure out who fucked you, who raped you, whether it's sexual, emotional, or whatever, and go from there. Should you want to get to the bottom of things? You and I had, or my mother would say you and me. No, it's you and I in that case, Ma. My mother always corrected that when I said it wrong. What the fuck? See, now I lost my train of thought. But we had to get to the bottom of the things to heal. Not everybody needs to get to the bottom of things, but I would argue that, I didn't learn that I dissociated. What you described your brain did what you know your kids' brains did, what you even described Rick did. I didn't know I was doing that till I was 54 years old. And it's like astonishing. Astonishing. Are you there? Are you there?
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm just, my wish is that this saves people from having to spend all of those years trying to figure it out. Have the aha moment a little sooner and then decide your path. Is it getting to the bottom or not getting to the bottom? But dear God, don't spend 30 years having conversations with a bunch of different therapists, because you're allowed to. I mean, you're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to pick your path. You don't have to stay, you don't have to be that little kicked puppy.
Take
God, I wish I
time.
knew that.
In one of my son's case, he's taken time. Take the time.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Thank you for listening and supporting Natural Born Redhead. If you follow the bouncing balls, please like and subscribe. If you know someone interested in sparing others grief and inciting joy, message me on Facebook or reach out via my website, Natural Born Redhead. J-Ma.